Hi gang, it's Matt here from Rover Group again, and today I just want to talk to you about tree safety surveys, which is pretty topical at the moment. Up in the Highlands of Scotland, where I am now, we've just had Storm Floris, which is a really crap name, but it has absolutely decimated a lot of the trees that were in leaf in the north of Scotland. So today I just want to talk about the importance of tree safety surveys. So the type of people that get tree safety surveys done, who needs a tree safety survey? Well, there's several people that we find, or several types of organisations that we find would really benefit from having their trees looked at. And usually the driver for these things is insurance. So if you've got a big commercial property like this and you've got trees in and around the built footprint of that property, your insurers, they're going to want to make sure that those trees are safe, and it will affect your premium. Tree safety surveys are generally carried out every 3 years, unless there is a problem with the tree, in which case your arboricultural consultant might suggest that you have annual inspections. That's not to get more cash out of you. What that is to do is to make sure the trees can be safely retained. What is a dangerous tree? A dangerous tree is essentially a tree that has got either structural defects, it might have defects beneath the ground, there might be some sort of problem with it, might be dying, might have ash dieback or some other disease that's come over from Europe. And what we look at is we look at targets. So to the sides of me and behind me are picnic benches. So this could be an area where staff come out and have their lunch. This is quite a small tree, this silver birch tree, but if this was a big tree and a limb was to fall off it, or there was going to be a problem with this tree, then it could potentially hit these picnic benches. So what could we do if we wanted to retain this tree and there was a problem with it? We could move the picnic benches, we could move the target. So this is not about condemning the trees, this is about managing the trees in the built environment. So what sort of problems do we see? Well, this tree here, these two silver birches, these are what we call formally planted. Somebody at some point has put them here. It's highly unlikely they were here before this property was built, because they're only about 25 to 30 years old. I can tell that just by touching them. And if you listen to the tree, sometimes it will tell you its age. And they're formally planted as part of the original setting out. And what tends to happen is, and it happens all across the UK every year, trees are planted in really stupid places. And that then means that they come under pressure from children at schools, they come under pressure from landscaping contractors. And as we move around this property, I'll show you some of the classic problems. In this particular tree here, it's got a very constrained rooting area, so we would expect it to do quite well in its younger years, and then as it gets older, it's going to become quite constrained. Small trees like this, generally not too much of a problem. People, they do tend to have this perception that they feel that their trees have got too tall. Well, that's what trees do. You don't cut a bit off your children's legs because they've got too big, do you? You know, you've got to let trees grow, you've got to let trees have space, and they add enormously to this kind of environment. They provide shade, they provide cover, they provide habitat for nature. So come with me, we'll have a walk around this property and I'll show you some of the common problems that we find on tree safety surveys. And what we can see here is fairly typical of trees that are planted in a tight environment like this. This is a pruning wound. This is decay in a pruning wound. And what's happened here, at some point, like I was just saying, the customer has thought these trees are too tall for this location. The tops have been cut out of these trees 3 to 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And what's happened is the trees haven't been able to compartmentalise the decay. They've started to regrow from that pruning wound, and that regrowth is now very poorly attached. It's weak, and at some point that will snap out unless it's managed. So what we've got here is a little short section of Leylandii hedging. Not really a tree, not really a massive hazard, but it is the kind of management issue that we see. So when we're doing tree safety surveys, we'll also do management recommendations, and us as a business, not everybody does it, but we'll do a video walkthrough like this because we realise that you as the customer don't want a really dry, boring report that means absolutely nothing to you. So my consultants will explain to you exactly what's going on in your site in a video, and that'll get delivered to your inbox with the report. But what about this conifer? Well, it's been planted in a stupid place, essentially. It's been planted next to a fence. And if this was a school, what tends to happen is the branches will grow through the fence, and then they provide a climbing opportunity for ne'er-do-wells. It's like going back to the 1960s using words like that. But people with nefarious intent will use the trees to climb over the fence. So it's important that these things are managed. Desperately inappropriate. Lowlandi cypress was imported into the UK because it's a fast growing tree and we use it for hedging, but unfortunately, even well managed, it gets out of control very, very quickly. We can see that sections of this Lowlandi hedge have been what we call tops. The tops have been cut out of it, but it keeps on growing, it keeps on growing, it keeps on growing. So this is desperately inappropriate. The other thing that we see is we've got a small little cherry tree here. And in terms of management recommendations, again, what's happened is this cherry tree, and particularly in schools, you get trees that are planted for memorial reasons and things like that, and they get planted in what we call a grass matrix. This is this heavily compacted grass surface, and what happens with grass? The grounds maintenance contractors want to mow the grass. What happens when they're mowing the grass? They strim around the base of the trees, and that can lead to decay and problems as well. The other thing that happens, particularly with this species, is that cherries have very wide spreading crowns, low, thick branches. They drop fruit, they're fruit bearing. So a lovely tree, but totally the wrong place. It will provide a slip hazard on paving. And the other thing that happens, and I'm not sure whether they'll get picked up on the camera, but you have these roots. So this is rooting sprouts off the roots of the cherry tree, because the roots are travelling out through the ground here. And then what happens is the roots start to come up through the surface, and those roots get mechanically damaged by mowing operations, and then eventually that has a negative effect on the tree as well. So it's not just tree safety issues that we're looking at, we're also looking at management issues. Where are the problems that are hiding that are actually going to cost you an absolute fortune as you move forwards into the future? Imagine a whole row of Leyland cypress right next to your boundary security fence. When that starts growing through the fence, growing over the fence, providing a climbing hazard, a litter trap, it goes from costing a couple of £100 in hedge trimming to thousands and thousands of pounds to get those trees removed. We've got another example over here of something that we see very often. So again, we've got a nice linear feature of cherry trees. Again, inappropriately planted. You can see some of the surface roots that I was talking about over there coming up into the coming up through the ground, and we've got a path of paving slabs going down here. And what do you think will happen? Well, of course, the paving slabs will start to get lifted by those roots, and then that creates a trip hazard. So these are all the things that we think about in tree safety surveys. We're not just looking at the health of the tree, structural defects, we're looking at management issues as well to add value. This tree's not too bad yet, but it is starting to get quite a low crown. Where we are at the moment, I can't disclose, but we are in the north of Scotland. When we get snow, these branches are going to be pushed down by the snow to a low level, and then they're going to cause a hazard to pedestrians. They also might start to impact the fence. So they're the sort of things that you see on these kind of sites. And there's two types of trees that you get on these sites. There's the formerly planted trees as part of the original setting out, and then we have remnant trees that might have been here prior to the construction of the buildings. I don't think we've got any on this site. We'll have a look. But those remnant trees, often they start to harbour issues because they might have been damaged during the construction phase. Nothing happens quick with trees. It takes 10, 20, 30 years sometimes before problems start to show themselves. So it's very, very important. If you're a facility manager, you look after sites like schools, office blocks, play areas, things like that. It's very, very important to have a tree safety survey at least every 3 years. Come with me now and we'll go and look at some roadside trees. So what we've got here is a very typical linear feature of roadside trees. This particular feature of trees, it looks like a shelter belt. It's made up of lots of different species. We've got some cherry in there, we've got some Scots pine, we've got some sycamore, all really good, wholesome tree species. And then in a minute, I'll show you a couple of remnant trees. So why is it important to have tree safety surveys carried out adjacent to roads? Well, it's pretty obvious. If a tree falls, it's going to create fairly serious damage to a car. Most of the fatalities in the UK each year are killed by people impacting fallen trees in their cars. Because when do trees blow over? Well, trees fail, trees blow over at a couple of different times of the year. It tends to be when we have periods of high winds. So the autumn time, October, November, I'm old enough to remember the 1987 storm in the south of England that absolutely decimated the beech trees through there. My friend, my videographer, Kian, can go away and he can find some imagery of the 1987 hurricane and the classic clip from, what was the news presenter's name? I can't remember, Michael Fish, who said, no, 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 a hurricane is not coming.
Good afternoon to you. Earlier on today, apparently a woman rang the BBC and said she heard that there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't.
Anyway, we've now gone full circle and we panic. We give our storms a name. Every single time that there's a little bit of wind comes along, we give that storm a name. So the trees fail at a couple of different times of the year, and predominantly that tends to be in the autumn time. This recent storm, Storm Floris, it hit in early August. What is so special about that? Well, at August time, the trees are heavy with water, they're heavy with leaves. The leaves, the tree, if the tree is in leaf, what happens is the tree, when the wind blows on it, acts like a massive sail, which means the crown of the tree moves about. That puts leverage on the stem of the tree. And if you've got particularly high winds, any structural defects, I'm going to destroy this tree, any sort of structural defects could lead to ripping apart like that. That's called an included union. So when the wind blows on it, the tree will rip apart out like that and it will just fall down onto the ground and have to be tidied up. So road safety surveys are really, really important. If you have got a stretch of land that fronts onto the road that's got large mature remnant trees on, it's very important to have those trees looked at, like I say, at least every 3 years. What problems can we get in this area? We can get low branches that may have been mechanically damaged by vehicles passing backwards and forwards. We can get, particularly here in the north of Scotland, we get problems with salt in the winter. That can affect the trees as well, and it can lead to damage to the foliage on the trees. We can get snapped branches, we can get snapped hanging branches over the road that might not be immediately obvious. So it's very, very important to have your roadside trees checked at least once every 3 years. So what we've got here is what we call in Scotland a granny pine. It's a Scots pine tree, Pinus sylvestris if you want the Latin name, baffling you with my font of knowledge when it comes to trees there. This tree has got what we call tight included union. So it's got a lot of stems that are very close together and they have not fused properly. It's got a lot of deadwood in the crown. It's quite squat, but it's well clear of the road. So it probably doesn't pose any harm to anybody. So we would have a look around the base of this tree. We'd be looking for fungal fruiting bodies. We'd be looking for snapped hanging branches that might affect this access way. We'd be looking for any serious hazards that if the tree failed or could cause the failure of the tree are going to cause harm to people or property. And then what happens off the back of that? Well, a report is produced off the back of that with recommendations. And what we do, and everybody does it slightly differently, at Rover, we will look at all the trees along this roadside that are within falling distance of the road and are owned by the client, but we will only collect data on trees that require work. So we are excluding negative results, because otherwise, who wants a spreadsheet with 500 trees in it and 498 of them are perfectly healthy. That makes absolutely no sense. You're paying for something you don't need. You're never going to read that data. You're never going to act on that data. You need to know, as the landowner, as the facility manager, where are the problems that you need to deal with. And we, as consultants, are highly aware of the fact that if we're not careful, we could generate thousands, tens of thousands of pounds worth of tree work. So you have to be pragmatic, you have to be sensible, you have to look at your tree estate in the round. So if you've got trees to manage, if you have been moved, worried by the latest storms, if you think that you could have some hidden problems, then I urge you, reach out to your chosen arboricultural contractor. I should change that, consultant. Reach out to your chosen arboricultural consultant and get them to come and have a look at your trees for you. It's good practice, it's sensible, and in the long term, it will probably save you money.